The boy wakes up with a slap to the head. His father was disappointed, saying he was the disgrace of the family. But what they didn't know was that Yurin could master every martial art in the world. In the kingdom of Krasis, on the northern border, an army advances. Its Duke, Elian, is astonished, yelling that it's unbelievable. Zombies rise and walk towards them. Elian remarks that their numbers exceed his imagination, and they bring the nightmare's poisonous mist. A soldier tells the Duke to look up, and he's surprised. Even a Death Knight, Durian, is among them. Not even among the 10 high-level knights fighting for the living could anyone guarantee victory against him. He says that with their current strength, they cannot win, and they should retreat to hold for a second. Elian replies that they can't, as the wall is already damaged, and if the gate falls, their kingdom will be over. No matter the sacrifice they make today, they must hold them back. But then something rushes past their side. A young man rides his crimson cape sweeping across the battlefield. Elian questions who is advancing so carelessly, and the soldier recognizes him. It's their reinforcement from the southern Rocks Marquisate, Yurin Rocks, the only one who fights with daggers. The soldier tries to say his opponent is Durian. A mere dagger could never cause damage until the weapon is plunged into the zombie. It sinks in, severing the undead's body. Elian is surprised, and the knight wonders if Durian was merging. He wants to know how it's possible. As Yurin throws his daggers, each one strikes the zombies and begins to dissolve their monstrous forms, melting them all with a single blow, making people wonder if he's a saint sent from the heavens. Yurin thinks they're being ridiculous. It was simply everything good for the body he would take for himself. 6 months earlier, the young man suddenly wakes up. He wonders where he is as a maid approaches the young master. Yurin lifts his head and says she's a beauty, but her clothes are strange and she's carrying a sword. The woman asks how the young master is feeling, because she was going to call the priest this time. Yurin extends his hand, catching the woman's attention, saying he just wants to ask something, but the girl has already left. He gets out of bed, wondering where on earth he is, until he looks to the side, seeing his fat figure in a mirror. He wonders where his young, handsome form went and why he turned into a fat child. Unable to comprehend this, the young man tries to convince himself it's all a dream, and if he sleeps again, maybe he'll wake up. The priest approaches and says the young master has finally woken up. Meanwhile, a man enters the room and calls him a bastard, because the disgrace that sullied his family's name has finally woken up. The priest tells his lord that he's only just woken up, and punishment can wait. The man grumbles a bit, and the priest says that for someone he beat until unconscious, he isn't very hurt. His mind is stable and most of his wounds have healed, which is a relief. However, the Lord shouts that he'd prefer him dead. Because he tried to assault his fiancée, he's a beast. He's 19 now, and it's time to grow up. Even his younger brother has awakened his aura, but the older brother is still fat and without a shred of energy. Yurin repeats this, completely shocked. The Lord turns, warning that once he recovers, he must go to her and beg for forgiveness. Yurin repeats her, and his father replies that it's his wife Ilya, and if she doesn't forgive him, he'll truly be punished, asking if he understands, and the protagonist accepts. The Lord warns that in any case, he must stop bringing disgrace upon their family name. Yurin trembles in fear, wondering if this is his identity, so he must be Wellington Rocks. The Lord is surprised to be called by his name, calling him a brat and slapping his face for being audacious enough to call his father by name. The big guy was beaten for several seconds. The priest tries to calm his lord, but without success. Yurin thinks it can't be. This must be a dream. Regaining consciousness after a while, he stands up, startled. He wonders why he hasn't woken up in the real world. The woman approaches, asking if he's finally awake. Yurin calls out Aaron, and the woman replies, but she becomes confused when he doesn't make any further contact. The protagonist asks if he's stuck there because he messed with Ilya and was knocked out. Aaron confirms, but asks why he's suddenly speaking so politely. Yurin agrees and asks if he really got beaten like that. The woman confirms, adding that to be precise, he assaulted Lady Ilya and she beat him until he passed out. The protagonist curses his life, leaving the girl perplexed, as he shouts that he's screwed, because there was no doubt. Somehow, he'd been transmigrated into the web novel he wrote, but not as the protagonist, instead as the trash villain who shames the main character and miserably loses his life, complaining that this couldn't be his fate. Aaron calls for her young master, but he keeps freaking out, saying this wasn't a webtoon, a word unknown to the woman. Yurin thinks the body he possessed was useless garbage. No talent, no skill, no effort, living only for his family's prestige. He loses his fiancée to the protagonist. He tries to ambush the protagonist for revenge, but gets beaten again instead, and he pathetically loses his life in an unnamed alley. Yurin wonders how they'll survive in such an uncertain world, reflecting that it's a fantasy world and he has no idea about this fat guy's abilities. But at least he knows about the fated encounters and items the protagonist hasn't obtained yet, so he decides to prepare quickly as he sits up in bed. He's hindered by the poorly managed center of gravity of his heavy body. Aaron asks if the young master is alright. Yurin replies, certainly not, but notices something different. The girl tells him he should be resting. The protagonist thinks he couldn't see it before, but that's why he frowned earlier. A system screen was beside Aaron. It says the girl's abilities are Swift Sword, clear mind mirror, and aura adaptation. The girl calls for the young master once more. Jurgen denies it, saying he was crazy for a few seconds but is fine now, and she should attend to her duties. Eren accepts and turns to leave while the protagonist watches her. He reflects on Swift's sword. Originally, Eren was a much stronger and more talented character than regular knights, but he wants to know what this affinity is, which stands at 0. He wonders if it's a dating sim and if it appeared because he played too many games of that style. He wants to know what kind of world building this is. The protagonist thinks for a bit, considering Euron's normal behavior and the non-negative affinity. But that wasn't the important part. Seeing his own body in the mirror while waiting for the system screen to appear. He yells yes, and looks at his status screen with the Eye of Creation skill and 4 heavens of the Tang clan. Thinking he has some special abilities, but among them, the 4 heavens of the Tang clan skill. It was from that wuxia webtoon he loved because the heroine was extremely beautiful. It's the clan that specializes in poisons and hidden weapons. The world building was a mix, but he decides to wait, because if he gains the martial arts of the 4 heavens of the Tang clan, he'd have a great chance to survive there. This was a martial art from a renowned sect in the 4 heavens province in wuxia novels, known for various poisons and specialized in silent assassination. He wonders why it's here if this is supposed to be a medieval fantasy world, but this means he can unlock his abilities. Wellington walks to his room, until Eren calls for her lord. He asks if his son has woken up, and the girl confirms. Wellington asks what he looks like. Eren replies he doesn't seem completely well yet. He fell when he tried to stand, and his general condition seemed poor. Wellington says Father Elio told him the wound wasn't deep, but his son seemed a little strange, because before, if he'd been told to beg Ilya for forgiveness, he would have thrown a tantrum, but now he strangely just accepted it. His personality hasn't changed, he was just stunned. Tomorrow he'd probably be furious, seeking revenge against Ilya. Eren says her young master will gradually get better. Wellington turns away annoyed, leaving the girl shocked. He says that even he, his own father, had given up on him. But the girl still believed. He should feel bad for the girl and let her live her life as a knight, wondering how hard it was to stay beneath him. But Eren thinks no, because today the young master seemed different somehow, and it was hard to explain. Earlier, Eren shouted, asking what he was talking about. The protagonist replied he just wanted to exercise a bit and she should show him the way. Eren questioned if he was really going to train now, and Euron confirmed, asking what the problem was. His creator's eye skill allowed him to see statuses, but he had no idea how to unlock the Sichuan Tang clan's martial arts. Maybe it was due to his obesity, so for now he would just exercise until he found a way. Euron thought this mansion was gigantic, the size of several stadiums, and he was already exhausted. But if he tried to exercise in his room, his fat would just keep coming back to bed. He definitely needed to cut out exercising at home. Also, all the servants he encountered showed extreme disgust towards him, but considering how Euron used to be, he couldn't blame them for it. They continued walking, and Euron asked if they were close yet. Eren replied they were almost there. This was the 3rd training center, and most knights used the 1st and 2nd ones. Euron suddenly noticed someone in front of him. He saw that the affinity was -91, with chances of sending him to his coffin. This man was Rekka Ulian, who called out to the young master, questioning what brought him to his training hall. Euron recognized him immediately, and the man laughed, saying it was an honor that the young master still remembered him. Euron agreed and looked at the sword, startled, then he suddenly called for Eren. He questioned if something had happened between them. Eren asked if he didn't remember. A few years ago, when the Marquis forced him to train, the furious young master called Rekka a squire. Rekka swung his sword while laughing, and after that, the Marquis gave up on making him train. Euron yelled that it was hopeless. Rekka looked at him out of the corner of his eye, thinking, this hopeless piece of nothing. Euron decided he would run away. He wanted to know if there was another training hall, as he wished to use one alone. Eren said this was the 4th hall, but it was so far away, and the materials were poor, so it was probably empty. Euron replied it was perfect and he should go there because if he was going to lose weight, he needed to do it properly. The bodyguard agreed and told him to follow. She showed him the 4th training hall, and Euron was breathing heavily from the walk. He looked down, seeing an equipment table, and thought that the Sichuan Tang clan specialized in throwing knives. So he decided he should try looking at the targets in front of him. Euron aimed at one of them and moved the dagger to the height of his face. Moving his arm back, he launched it with all his strength. But the dagger just bounced off the floor, failing to hit its target. He complained about having thought he could unlock it, but then he noticed Eren behind him. So he made an excuse, saying he was just playing around. He should build basic stamina first, and decided he would run a few times around the hall. He would train on his own, so Eren could do as she pleased. Wellington questioned this, utterly incredulous, because Euron had gone to the training grounds and started working hard. It was strange, and he questioned how long it would last. 3 weeks passed, and the Lord said that for 3 entire weeks, he hadn't stopped training. The young man had lost a lot of weight, and his appearance had changed noticeably. As expected of his son, without all that fat, he was truly handsome. He wondered if he had truly matured. In the protagonist's castle, he thought he had lost a lot of weight, but the Sichuan Tang clan's technique refused to unlock. He would try for a month, and if it didn't work, he'd just steal some of the protagonist's lucky encounters. Erin suddenly arrived, saying she brought dinner, and the young man thanked her. It was Shireen's soup, a nutrient-rich meal excellent for burning fat and building muscle. Yurin complained about the food, and Erin asked if he was tired of it. The protagonist confirmed he hadn't eaten anything else for 3 whole weeks, and the girl called out to the young master. She wanted to know what he truly wanted, to lose weight or to become a knight. Yurin replied he wished to become a knight, and Erin said that in this territory, even the powerful Marquis ate Shireen's soup after training, so the young master should stop complaining. He should just eat the soup at once. Yurin reluctantly accepted the orders. He thought he was living and learning, but he wondered what kind of old custom this was. In any case, this soup had helped him lose fat, so he would just eat it from now. He scooped some with a spoon and brought it to his mouth. Yurin noticed something different and wondered what it was, because today the Shireen's soup tasted a little different. A system screen appeared in front of him, warning that he had ingested poison, but another notification also appeared in sequence. The protagonist had satisfied the condition for unlocking the Sichuan Tang clan skill. This ability had been unlocked, leaving the protagonist utterly incredulous. Suddenly, the Marquis noticed someone knocking at his door and told him to enter. It was his wife, who announced she'd have brought some tea. Kana, his second wife, asked what he was looking at so intently. Wellington replied he was just thinking about how beautiful the garden was. Kana said she was personally taking care of it with great attention, and her husband spoke of her admirable skills. But his wife suddenly held him, questioning when he would choose Colin as his heir, as he had mentioned before. Since it was already decided anyway, it would be good to do it quickly. Wellington resisted the embrace and called out to Kana, warning that it would take a little more time. Kana asked why, since he had said he would name him last month. The Lord confirmed, but she had probably heard as well. Recently, it seemed Yurin had finally come to his senses, and he was the eldest son of House Rocks. If he truly put in the effort, he could be a good successor. Kana said it was true, and she had heard a lot as well. She was worried, but he seemed to have recovered at least, which must be a relief for her husband. Wellington said it was funny to think that after being beaten by his fiancée, he really woke up, but Kana questioned what he would do about the successor. The Lord replied that Yurin had only been training for 3 weeks, and it was better to watch for a little longer. But he promised that if Yurin reverted to his old ways, he would immediately give the heir title to Colin. Kana said she would go to her room first, and he should finish his work quickly. Finally, leaving the Duke's room, she bit her lip in anger. She called Yurin's name and told him to just wait and see. Back in his room, the protagonist was impressed that he had unlocked the skill. He then stated that the Sichuan Tang family specialized in poison, and the condition to unlock it was to ingest poison. But pausing to think, he looked at the soup's status again. It had an icon, and he wanted to know what was above it. Looking at it made the text scroll down. He saw that it even showed a Hanyang herb used for paralysis. The young man seemed excited, and Erin looked puzzled, wanting to know why the young master wasn't eating. Yurin replied he would eat and brought another spoonful to his mouth. As he chewed, he thought for a moment longer, wondering who put the poison in it, as Yurin usually wasn't defeated by poison. Something had changed the flow of the story, and now that he thought about it, something hadn't happened yet. He remembered his father alongside Colin. He wondered why his father hadn't officially named Colin as heir yet, and if it was because he had started training. In any case, this in the food probably came from that side. Swallowing the last bit, suddenly, another system screen appeared in front of him. It warned that the conditions for the weak paralysis poison had been met. The young man announced he had finished eating. This was so good it made me want to cry. Erin was shocked. Yurin said he wanted to be alone for a while and asked if she could leave. The bodyguard simply agreed. She told him to rest as she would see him tomorrow, and Yurin agreed, bidding her good night. When she left the room, the young man turned to the mirror. He said he would now check on the Sichuan Tang clan. He commanded the creator's eye to appear at once. The system showed his status in the synchronization rate, which had dropped to 97. Yurin said it was a smart interface, and if he focused only on the part with a plus icon, he saw that he now had poison, martial arts, and hidden weapon skills. First, he decided he would check on that. Only the weak paralysis skill was unlocked, but he had no internal technique. The protagonist said there were many poisons and he should scroll down as far as he could, until he saw that the final poison was invisibility. This means he must unlock the initial ones first, as it's a leveled system. To achieve the most basic ability, weak paralysis, he needs an internal technique. It made sense, as the Tang clan of Sichuan used internal energy to store poisons, and now he would check the martial arts. There were 3 martial arts options: the Black Poison Arts, Thunder Needle, and the Divine Energy of 10,000 poisons. Yurin said it was an easy choice, especially for a Wuxia fan. The Black Poison martial arts focus on poison, the Thunder Needle martial art focuses on hidden equipment, and the Divine Energy of 10,000 poisons technique takes longer to improve, but it allows him to enhance both his poison and hidden equipment. Choosing that technique right away, the system channeled energy into him. Yurin said it was unbelievable. The technique's mantras were simply etched into his mind. He had to try circulating the energy right now. Taking off his shirt and sitting on the bed, he gathered energy in his danshin. The young man noticed a strange flow throughout his body. This must be Kuai. He had to guide it through his meridians and store it in his danshin to build his internal strength. The next day, the young man finished his concentration. He exclaimed it was incredible. Those martial arts novels weren't lying about training all night without sleep. This was reality and he didn't feel tired at all. But the fact was, his body was full of energy. He could feel a flow of Hui around him. He could tell how many birds were outside the window without even looking. He also felt a warm energy in his danshin, and now, if he circulated Hui in his head without a mirror, the status window would open, showing he had 1 star in the technique. The protagonist felt a familiar aura outside the door. He looked there until Aaron opened it, calling out to her young master, as she had come to wake him. But since he looked untouched, he must not have slept. Yurin replied that it just happened that way. She responded that it wasn't good and he should rest for today's training. The protagonist denied it, saying he was already going. He felt incredible and was in great condition, so he had to train. Aaron agreed and informed him she would prepare breakfast first. She left the room, wondering when the young master had started gaining muscles. Outside the training grounds, Yurin approached the daggers on the table. He muttered, "It's true," as he picked up a dagger. He prepared to throw, but then noticed something different. In front of his eyes was a crosshair, just like in first-person shooter games, so he would aim precisely at the target. Moving his body quickly while Aaron watched, concerned, Yurin launched the weapon, and it hit the target, releasing a purple aura. He then said he really did it, and the guard was impressed. The protagonist also released the system's hidden weapons. Aaron called out to the young master, questioning what he had just done. The protagonist replied that he didn't know either, and thought the results of last month's training were starting to show. She responded that there was no way, becoming utterly shocked. Yurin reflected that it was the first time seeing her like this and wondered if he should try again. He held the dagger once more. He thought that when he threw at something, it felt as if his internal energy surged from his danshin, and it was good because this time he would throw faster and stronger. He threw it once more at the target, embedding the dagger. The target even shattered. Aaron was utterly astonished by this, and the protagonist kept a smile on his face. He thought that having aim like a game was basically using a hack. Believe it or not, back in the day, there was a first-person game called Battle Attack, and he won the enrollment tournament. Aaron questioned what on earth that was. The protagonist wanted to know if she felt anything different about him, and the guard repeated her question. She said yes, and besides the fact that he had lost more weight than yesterday. She couldn't really say, and the protagonist questioned her about losing weight. Aaron confirmed it, saying he had been training every day and drinking chireen soup, but today he had changed more noticeably. The protagonist was confused and wondered if she couldn't feel the internal energy flowing in his body. This meant that in this world only he could use internal energy and nobody could detect it, so he had gained incredible power. He chuckled, wondering if he should continue practicing. He hit the target twice in a row with extreme ease. He said this time he would try something different. He embedded one dagger into the handle of another. He declared it perfect, astonishing his guard once more. She questioned if she could try once. Holding the dagger and aiming calmly, the girl threw it with all her might, but it didn't even reach the target or hit the side. Yurin said there was something she wasn't capable of doing, and the girl grew frustrated. Then the young man suddenly noticed something. A status window had appeared above her head. She had unlocked the direct cut skill. The protagonist repeated the part about it being executable with any weapon. He said he would test it while Aaron grew annoyed because it wasn't working for her. He wondered if he should try with this. He told Aaron to move aside for a moment. She questioned what was in his hand, as he was holding a broken wooden sword. The protagonist raised it to the highest point, feeling a lot of internal energy in his body flowing from his danshin to his arms. Thus, he launched it, executing the direct cut. That broken sword embedded itself in the center of the target and shattered everything around it. Aaron was impressed and asked what in the world that was. Wanting to know what kind of power the young master had, Yurin replied that he wasn't sure and maybe it was just practice. His bodyguard responded that it was impossible for it to be just that. The protagonist said he knew about her reporting his training to her father, so he had a favor to ask. He wanted her to keep this matter a secret for a while. Aaron questioned this, and Yurin said he was testing many things now and would explain himself later, so she should wait. She simply accepted, and thus the day passed. The household staff bid farewell, saying good work, and that they would see each other tomorrow. The same routine happened with a man named Peru, who simply accepted it. Walking calmly by, he changed direction. Yurin watched him with a cold expression. Then he decided to use the creator's eye on him. This was Peru with zero affinity, the power of poisonous touch, and agile movement. Yurin said this ability allowed him to put poison in his food, and it was definitely this guy. So he would finally do the real test, because the arrow floating in his hand would go straight for this guy. Whispering the invocation of the paralytic poison, his aura descended to his 2 index fingers. Peru suddenly felt something strange in his body. He turned around, shouting that his body couldn't move. The protagonist approached the unconscious man, saying the test was a success. He could see the total duration was 1 hour, and he would move this man first, picking him up on his back. As might fell elsewhere, Peru suffered. The protagonist told him to snap out of it. He wanted to know if he had regained consciousness and knew who he was. Peru trembled with fear, and the protagonist said that if he wanted to live, he should answer correctly, asking if it was he who had put poison in his soup. He had some questions for this man. Peru should blink once if the answer was correct and twice if it was wrong. He asked if he understood, and Peru blinked once. The protagonist decided to ask again, wanting to know if he was the one who poisoned his soup. Peru looked at him coldly and just blinked once. Yurin questioned if the poison given to him was the Hanyang herb. Peru flinched and blinked once more. Moving to the next question, the protagonist asked if the one who sent him was Marquise Kana. Yurin was surprised by the answer as Peru had denied it. He told the man not to lie, because he could tell everything, and if he lied, he wouldn't live much longer. Now he would ask again, wanting to know if Miss Kana gave the order. Peru became even more frightened and denied it once more. The protagonist thought he didn't seem to be lying and wanted to know who it was, but he would act for a while, telling him to eat and swallow this because it was called the initial poison. The man swallowed, and the protagonist said that from this moment he had exactly 1 month remaining. If he didn't take the antidote he possessed when the month passed, all of his organs would melt, and for now, it was better to follow his orders. He asked if he understood, and Peru agreed. Now the protagonist touched his head. Trying to release the paralysis poison, the man is no longer restricted. The protagonist tells him he can move and speak now, and Peru accepts. Yurin says he'll ask one more time, wanting to know who sent him. Peru trembles slightly in fear, saying it was the Knight's commander, Karox Livingtine. He had ordered that the young master must lose his life as a soldier before the year ends. The protagonist thinks he's Kana's older brother, appointed commander due to connections, but that wasn't important. He hands a piece of paper to his new subordinate. Peru questions if those weren't all poisons. The protagonist thinks few people have knowledge like this guy. He then tells him that someone like him could acquire them on the black market and should take Karox's money. He must bring all the poisons, starting with the one he already has by tomorrow night. Peru asks why he needs all these poisons. Yurin replies, asking when he gave him permission to ask questions. The subordinate merely understands hesitantly. Yurin turns, saying they should leave quickly. And furthermore, starting today, all his medicinal soups should contain a lot of Hanyang grass. Peru questions this, utterly shocked. Back in his room, the protagonist says that was incredible and martial arts are truly strong beyond measure, and he still fell for his initial poison where he just gathered several leaves and Peru believed it. But anyway, for now, he needs to quickly master the martial arts of the 4 heavenly tangs. If things went differently than he wrote, terrible events would occur around the world. After a full day passed, Peru calls for the young master, informing him that he brought all the poisonous herbs he had on hand. Leaving some ginseng and leaves on the table, the protagonist says this was Hanyang grass, the reverse green creeper, and the other was a crow ink leaf. Peru is surprised, asking how he knew as they were all rare toxic herbs. Yurin replies it was very basic and reflects that he can see all of this with the status window. But he changes the subject, asking why Peru had the other poisons if Hanyang grass would be enough to do it. Peru responds that Hanyang grass takes a long time, and if resistance develops, anyone can endure it. If mixed with the green creeper, the effects grow stronger. The protagonist summarizes that if the poisons are combined, they become stronger and harder to detect. Wanting to know where Peru learned about poisons, Peru says that when he was 8 years old, he was sold to the Livingtine family and learned from a poison master. There were about 20 children, but all perished, and only he survived. Yurin thinks that without an affinity for poison, children wouldn't survive long, and Peru doesn't seem grateful to the family. So he gained a useful person, saying he did well, and that was all for today. Peru thanks the young master and wishes him a peaceful night. The protagonist is left alone in the room, thinking it was time to begin. With those poisonous herbs there, he would eat them all, bringing one to his mouth. The protagonist feels as if he's going to vomit from the taste. His system notifies him that all poisons have been ingested and there is great danger, so he must meditate and ascend to level 2. The protagonist takes a deep breath, trying to concentrate with all his might. After another day passed, Era knocks on his door, telling her lord that it was already morning. She notices that the young master had already woken up and is surprised, because the young master was sitting on the bed, meditating. She questions what on earth had happened to his body. The protagonist manages to reach 2 stars and acquires the draconic treasure martial art and 3 more poisons. He then awakens with a smile on his face. She wants to know what in the world happened to the young master, but she smells a strange odor and complains about it. The protagonist simply accepts it and scratches his head. He reflects that it was true. When internal energy and martial arts advance a level, a lot of impurities are removed from the body. He then walks, saying it smells a bit, and he should open the window. Aaron asks him not to do that and go straight to the bath. As the day progresses, she leads the young master's way. Yurin laughs, seeing that he was learning the movements of the Draconic Steps martial art, an optimized movement and evasion technique used by the Tang family. He can't believe he's learning something that only appears in novels, thinking he'll just imitate the movements for now. Aaron calls for the young master and turns, wanting to know why he was suddenly walking like a drunk and what was wrong with his body. The protagonist replies that he was fine and she shouldn't worry. Laughing as he walks from side to side, Aaron questions if he was really okay, because he was going to Training Hall 1 today, and there were many knights there. The protagonist confirms he will certainly be fine. He was just curious about how the other knights train, and she didn't need to worry about him. Aaron warns that they were almost there. The knights train arduously, swinging their swords from top to bottom and from side to side. A knight is surprised and questions who that person was because that woman was the eldest young master's servant, but they want to know who the handsome young man behind her was. People are astonished, remembering that the young master lost tons of weight from training. Wanting to know what kind of magic he used to go from being a nobody, the protagonist thinks it doesn't matter if these guys whisper quietly. His internal energy allows him to hear everything. Aaron points to a guy in the hallway focused on training who seemed to be a knight apprentice, but his posture was excellent, and he would probably become a novice soon. These movements were basic forms of rocks fencing, so the young master should observe carefully. While Yurin notices that guy. He was Clyde, a key character in the novel who becomes the protagonist's ally. He had never written his past before he was found. Clyde swings his sword from top to bottom, and Yurin thinks it was interesting for him to be in a place like this. A good opportunity would come later anyway. Today, these knights who've had a negative affinity with him became his test subjects. First, he'll test in Chain, choosing a purple-haired knight as his target. He decides to activate it, and the knight feels it instantly, falling to the ground on his knees as other people run towards him, wanting to know what it was and if he needed to go to the bathroom. The man denies it, salivating as he tries to endure the pain. He falls to the ground, and the knights shout that they need to call the priest. But suddenly, the man's pain vanishes, and his boss questions what was wrong. The pain was gone, and the boss questions if he was joking and tells him to go to the bathroom. The knight tries to argue that he was genuinely suffering from pain. Yurin says it was good, and this time he'll activate the soul disintegration mist, which causes fear and confusion in the target within range. Suddenly, a knight hears a bang because the man in front of him had turned into a terrifying demon. Aaron sees the men fallen on the ground, shouting for the demon to go away. She questions why they were like that. In his nightmare, the man faces a demon and a skeleton try and take his life, cursing it. But suddenly, everything vanishes. They ask what that was suddenly. Yurin thinks he can't let them lose, and that was enough testing for today as it was impressive. So he announces he'll go back for today. Aaron questions if he's retreating so early, and the protagonist replies it was noisy there, and he would go to Hall 4 as planned. On the way, and meet a girl. She says a guest for the young master had arrived. Miss Ilya Marcus had come to see him. The woman at the window says that this time she will truly break Yurin's resistance. Turning to the protagonist, who merely calls her name. The girl suddenly blushes, and Yurin questions if she'd arrived yet. Ilya doesn't recognize him and asks who he was. Earlier, when the maid called and announced that Ilya Marcus was waiting, the protagonist thinks it was his strong-willed fiancé coming to visit him. It was probably this time when she demanded to break off the engagement. But Yurin kept refusing and telling her not to think like that. The young man says the situation can't be helped. Back in the room, the protagonist replies that it was him, Yurin. The girl is surprised, and he says it's been a while. Helia says she heard the rumor about him losing weight from training, but thought it was obviously false, because it hadn't even been 2 months, and he had changed so much. The protagonist says it was because he worked hard, leaving Ilya confused. After being beaten, Yurin thought for a long time. Then he decided to change his life. Ilya asked if he wanted to fight back for revenge, but the young man refused. He knelt grateful to her because she had helped him come to his senses, and he was truly sorry for what happened. He said he would accept if she wanted to break off their engagement because of it. She simply asked who he was as she didn't recognize him. Yurin replied that he was the former nobody of the Rocks family. Again, he apologized deeply for everything he had done. Ilya was surprised by this. The protagonist thought, to be honest, it wasn't his fault but the original owner of this bodies. The reason he was asking for forgiveness was specific. Ilya wasn't just a simple heroine. She possessed the Sword Queen ability, which only further enhanced her swordsmanship. Later, she would save the fallen protagonist and even defeat the final villain, all thanks to her ability. That's why, even if the engagement was broken, it would be beneficial to restore their relationship and make her his ally. But Ilya told him to stand up, questioning if he was serious about this. Yurin replied yes and promised, but the girl refused. She demanded he swear on it, all while emanating a terrifying aura. The protagonist thought it was a suffocating pressure, and he had seen this scene somewhere before. Ilya said he didn't want to live as he did before, and if he broke the agreement, she would beat him. The protagonist was confused, as the original Ilya had said this to the protagonist. Either way, he couldn't breathe, murmuring about the myriad poison of the electric divine art. Ilya was surprised as the protagonist stood up. She questioned how he resisted her aura, but the protagonist accepted and swore to it with a sweet smile on his face. Ilya became embarrassed and turned to leave, saying she would keep an eye on him. If he messed up one more time, they would break the engagement, no matter the reason. The protagonist was surprised they hadn't ended it yet. At the Lord's castle, Wellington asked if she had found Yurin, and the girl confirmed. He questioned if she had made her decision. Ilya confirmed once more, saying that the engagement would not be broken no matter what. Wellington asked for her reason. Ilya explained that her father always said people couldn't change, but there was a rumor that *** had changed, and she was curious. She had been wondering if he had returned to being the weak but gentle Yurin from her childhood. Instead, he had become a completely different person, and that was why she wanted to believe in him just this once. Wellington asked if that was all, and the girl affirmed it. But if he goes back to being a loser, I'll beat him until he gets tired. Wellington said it was to be expected from a great warrior, and she should take care of Yurin. Ilya decided to go on her way, but the Lord asked her to stay a few more days. The girl mentioned that she had told her father she would break the engagement, which was a bit awkward. Wellington asked if she would see Urine before leaving, but Ilya refused, saying he was training and she didn't want to interrupt him. The day passed and Urine wondered why his father had called him. He shook his head, asking who *** was, and the protagonist didn't understand the question. Wellington chuckled, saying it was a joke and that Urine had truly worked hard, but he wanted to know if Urine knew why he had been summoned. Urine asked if it was about the start of his night training. Wellington said he was right and had become sharp-witted too. Now you will learn the Rock's family's swordsmanship, he declared. The protagonist then called the Marquis, saying he had something new to tell him. His father asked about throwing arts, as Urine wanted to learn that instead of swordsmanship. The protagonist confirmed the information, and Wellington replied that it was unacceptable. Such vulgar skills were used by bandits. With that technique, he wouldn't even come close to earning a knight's armor or defeating a low-level monster like a Borak. Urine then suggested they make a bet whether he could hunt a Borak with a dagger. If Wellington was so confident, they should wager on it. His father sighed, saying he was being unnecessarily stubborn. A warrior's blade needed aura to destroy a Borak's scales. Unless you've practiced throwing for 100 years, you'll never be able to pierce a Borak's scales. The protagonist said that in that case, his father must be sure of his victory, so you should make a bet with me. His father called him reckless and said he would take this chance to utterly crush his stubbornness. Asking what the conditions for victory were, Urine replied that if he defeated a Borak with his dagger, he would manage his own training, and if he failed, he would do whatever his father commanded. As the day passed, the protagonist thought it was good that Aaron hadn't reported his training, and the real test would be tomorrow. He wondered how many attempts it would take to pierce a Borak's scales. Just in case, he would eat some poisonous herbs tonight and raise his myriad poison divine body to 3 stars. He turned when he heard a noise. Aaron called out to the young master, announcing that she was there to deliver the Marquis' message. Tomorrow at noon, the location will be the first training center. He asked if even she knew about the bet, and Aaron replied that not only she, but the entire estate was already aware. Thanks to that, the whole place was bursting with laughter. Everyone was talking about how the young master would wet his pants in fear or run when he saw Borak, having a great time discussing it. After all, the young master continued to be public enemy number 1. Urine said, in that case, all these people will be watching tomorrow. Aaron confirmed, saying the Marquis wouldn't stop there and the training center would be completely full. The young man grumbled that it was the price of fame, but he wanted to know what Aaron thought would happen. The girl said it would probably be young master's day to shine. His myriad poison divine body technique reached 3 stars, and the great hour of the test arrived. The people cheered, shouting either against or in favor of the young master. Urine said it was truly embarrassing. His father started the event by asking if his son was ready. The young man confirmed, but mentioned there was a huge audience. Wellington said he had only told his wizard, but somehow the news had spread to everyone. You should try not to be ashamed of it. The wizard announced he would begin and use his low-range summoning magic. Urine thought he would finally see magic with his own eyes. A lightning bolt suddenly struck the battlefield, with a creature taking shape amidst the smoke. The protagonist thought there was something even more incredible than that, seeing a monster he had created as an author right in front of him. A Borak, a sea monster, 1.50 meters tall. The people thought they shouldn't look at it. It was terrifying. The protagonist was impressed. This was exactly how it looked. This monster, the Borak, was something that had come to his mind while he was eating purple fish sashimi, and was full of ideas for monsters. If not for its legs and arms, it would even be a little cute. The monster charged toward the young man. Urine merely noticed the attack and dodged, moving to the creature's back. The people were impressed, and the Lord said it wasn't over yet. The Borak turned, completely bewildered. The protagonist thought it had just charged without even thinking. But it wasn't as fast as he had imagined. First, he would see how tough its scales were, drawing a dagger. Then he noticed something different. There was a target-like mark indicating a weak point on the creature. The protagonist decided to try, swinging his arm to throw the dagger. His QA channeled into the blade, striking the creature's weak point. The Borak suddenly felt a sharp pain, falling to the ground defeated, preventing any further entertainment for the audience. The protagonist grumbled, thinking it had fallen in just one hit. The people were impressed, and even Wellington was utterly shocked. Everyone shouted in favor of the young master, saying he had really done it. The young master had defeated the Borak, and it was so cool. They applauded him until a voice called out, "Urine, you brat," questioning how on earth he had done it. The protagonist said he had aimed carefully and hit the correct spot. His father complained that he couldn't accept this because a Borak had been defeated by a simple dagger, and that was impossible. The protagonist questioned if the great Marquis Rox would go back on his word. His wizard called out to the Marquis, saying that under the Borak's arm there was a spot without scales and the young master had hit it. Wellington complained it was pure luck, but the protagonist said a bet was still a bet. His father asked for just one more round, as he would add another promise instead. If he won this time, whatever he asked for would guarantee a wish. But if he lost, he would have to go back and learn fencing as they agreed, and the protagonist was excited about it. His father said that this time his opponent would be a knight, not a Borak. He asked if he would accept the challenge now. The protagonist said yes, and that it didn't matter to him. He thought quite the opposite, for this was his chance. He would face the commander of the Knights, Karox, wondering if this could be his opportunity to break that guy's arrogance. But he still wanted to keep Haru's poison and should let him go for now. Wellington said that a fully trained knight would certainly be too much for him to handle, so he would put an apprentice in instead, and that would be fair enough. The protagonist thought about it, wondering if he could choose the knight. He chose Clyde as his opponent. The man walked toward the arena with his sword on his back. Then he said the Marquis had called for him, and Wellington remarked that he seemed very confident. He was going to give Clyde a task. The apprentice accepted, saying he would carry out any command from his lord. He told him to straighten that boy out, and Clyde turned around. The young master merely waved at him, leaving the fencing apprentice completely bewildered. Wellington asked what was wrong and if he wasn't confident he could do it. Clyde denied it, stating he would do as ordered. The protagonist told him not to worry too much. He'd only throw 3 daggers, and if Clyde blocked all 3, he could claim victory. Wellington questioned if he saw the boy's arrogance and insisted he teach him a real lesson this time. Clyde readied his sword, and the protagonist circled the arena. The knights told him that if he lost, he'd have no dinner tonight and would have to run 100 laps around the training grounds. A person in the audience with a feminine voice said the young master could do it. He thought whoever that was, they were rooting for him. Clyde then called out to the young master, announcing he was ready, and Urine turned around as well. He prepared his first dagger, intending to start by putting out the lights, but he noticed something strange. Compared to his previous fight with Borak, Clyde had many more openings. If he landed a hit on one of those, he could finish him. He wouldn't let that happen, so he hurled his first dagger. He would simply advance directly. Clyde said, "Good," and tried to defend with his sword. He was forced to retreat about 4 steps because of it. People wondered what that sound was. It seemed like a cannon blast. Wellington told him to wait and noticed the dagger falling to the ground. He picked it up, wondering how such power could come from an ordinary dagger. Clyde trembled in fear, his sword having been pierced. The protagonist asked if he was warmed up now, as he'd seen what happened if he dropped his guard. He warned him to be ready because this time he'd throw everything he had, emanating a pressure that made the knight in training tremble. The protagonist thought that even after all this, Clyde was still a main character. He wouldn't lose this way, and Urine decided it was time, preparing his dagger for a direct strike. That tremendous blast happened once more, approaching the knight. Clyde tried to counterattack with his long sword, but an immense booming collision filled the arena. As the smoke began to dissipate, the people looked astonished. The Marquis couldn't believe the outcome. Clyde had fallen to his knees. He trembled with fear now, his sword broken into 2 pieces. Then he dropped it, leaving Marquis Wellington speechless. He called out to Urine, saying they needed to speak, just the 2 of them. The protagonist said the match wasn't over yet. 1 dagger remained, and the Marquis questioned this, since that had been enough, but Urine decided he would ask Clyde directly, calling Clyde to lift his head. He called out to his young master. The protagonist asked if he would end the battle like this, and if someone who wanted to become a knight would accept such humiliation. Whether it was victory or defeat, he should swing his sword until a clear end, for that was a knight's way. He then shouted that he would ask Clyde one more time if he was going to give up like this. The knight murmured a bit, calling out to the young master, but he demanded they bring him a new sword to use. Standing up and emanating energy, he declared he wouldn't back down this way. The knights were astonished, and the Marquis wondered how a novice could awaken his aura like this. Urine thought that, as expected, at this opening point, Clyde's berserker ability manifested. Now he could test higher-level techniques. The opponents stared at each other for a few seconds. Clyde called out to the young master, telling him to throw his dagger. Wellington inwardly denied the situation. For such an aura to manifest, it was a talent on the level of a high-ranking knight. Wondering what Urine would do, the protagonist simply replied that it was good, taking his last dagger and putting all his strength into it. He threw it in a completely awkward manner toward the man. Clyde wondered what that was and why it was so slow this time, shouting that he was just messing with him. Then he tried to cut the dagger, but it merely swerved past his sword. He was bewildered, and Wellington became aware of the situation upon seeing this state. The dagger was embedded in Clyde's side, coming close to piercing his bones, causing the knight great pain. He fell to the ground. People wondered what that was. It was so slow. Clyde should stop exaggerating, they thought, wondering if he was going easy just because it was the young master. The protagonist thought there must be more internal force embedded in it this time, causing intense pain. His father called Urine, letting him know they would talk later, because he had won the bet today. The protagonist cracked a smile. Clyde suffered from the wound on his shoulder, but the protagonist touched him, telling him to wait a moment, using energy absorption. Clyde noticed the pain fading away. He thanked the young master for it, and Urine said it was nothing. The knight asked for his forgiveness. He explained that at first, when the dagger flew so slowly, he thought the young master was underestimating him. But it wasn't that at all. It was a precise technique. Not even a master could acquire such a technique in so little time, so he must have been hiding his true strength. He asked if there was some secret faction targeting the Marquis family, and if that was why he'd been hiding his strength until now. It was no wonder it seemed strange that only the young master was left behind. It was a noble sacrifice. Urine thought this guy always loved conspiracy theories. Clyde, meanwhile, said the young master had shown a commendable attitude when he fought against this secret organization. If he ever needed Clyde, he should just ask. The protagonist wondered when his favorability had gotten so high, so he accepted, saying they would meet again later, thinking Clyde was a simple berserker with a good nature. Clyde told him to trust him, for he would spread the word that the young master was never trash and would make sure everyone heard the rumors. Staying close to Clyde could be useful, as one day he'd be able to complete missions alone, and that would be beneficial. Aaron said the young master had worked hard, and Yurin thanked her. She spoke about his last technique, saying she'd never seen anything like it. The protagonist said it was a new skill and asked what she thought of it. Aaron said that watching it, her mind wandered to how she would have lost if she had faced him without seeing it first. But now she was sure she could block it. The protagonist thought she wasn't bluffing, and among her abilities, she possessed the Tranquil Mind Mirror trait, which was rare and powerful. Yurin replied that she had been training as a knight since she was a child, and if she hadn't let down her guard, she would have become a knight. He asked if she was satisfied with the way things were now. Aaron didn't understand why the question was so sudden. As the day progressed, Wellington rested in his office. The protagonist entered the room, asking why the Marquis had called him. His father said, "It's just us. When it's just the two of us, you can call me father. This formality is killing the mood." Yurin merely accepted, remaining bewildered. His father asked what exactly that technique he used yesterday was, because even after searching through books, he'd never seen such a strange move. He'd only been training for a month, and no matter how rare a genius might be, learning a technique on one's own was impossible. He demanded to know what happened and told him to tell the truth. The protagonist thought he could reveal that, but he had something good prepared. He announced that he had found a book, and his father inquired about it. The young man confirmed, explaining that while walking through the state library looking for manuals, he had stumbled upon a book. Wondering who left the book on the floor, he leaned his back against the wall. Suddenly, a book fell from the top of the dusty shelf. There was no title on its cover, just a strange symbol etched into it. The protagonist didn't think much of it and opened the book. A light burst forth, embedding something directly into his mind. Then the book vanished completely. Wellington said this meant was a magic tome. The protagonist nodded. He mused that a magic tome was a self-made rule, possessing the power of a great mage to pass on their techniques. The Lord stated that the magic tome worked this way, and even if he didn't know how, it might have been brought by his ancestors. Finding this book was a stroke of great luck for him. The protagonist decided he would consider this an unexpected windfall. His father stood up, stating that a promise was a promise and he would no longer make him learn swordsmanship. As an additional gesture for his promise, he should state what he desired. The protagonist called his father in a calm voice. He said he would like the position of heir, leaving Wellington shocked. However, if he did this, his father couldn't guarantee it. Wellington thought for a moment and said that with his authority he could. The protagonist questioned why he seemed so uncomfortable, because if he became a successor, it would be a problem for him, as many would oppose the Marquis' house, especially the young lady, who would cause great turmoil. So this time he would make a concession. His father inquired about it, but quickly accepted and thanked him. Yurin thought that, in any case, he had no interest in the successor's position. If he became the successor, he would be stuck with the Marquis all day, receiving education related to state management. Instead, he wanted to use the time to improve his skills in the four heavens of the Tang clan and travel the world to gain opportunities. Wellington told him to state something else he desired, and the protagonist said he wanted to form his own order of knights. He wanted Aaron, currently his butler, and Clyde, who had dueled with him earlier, as his two knights. His father replied that it wasn't as difficult as the heir's position, and Aaron was also a precious talent, so it would be a waste to keep her as a butler. He should do as he wished, and Yurin simply thanked him. The Lord questioned him about his butler, as there weren't many left currently. Yurin replied that there was someone named Peru working in the kitchen, and he wanted to use him as a butler, but he would appreciate it if the Marquis took the blame to give him this chance. Wellington asked if something was happening, and Yurin replied that he would explain later. His father merely accepted with a sigh. The protagonist thought his father seemed to trust him and didn't even ask questions. On second thought, he had no idea how his favorability had grown, perhaps because he was his son. Outside, the protagonist announced that from today on, the two of them were members of his exclusive knight order. For now, they must train hard during practical exercises, and also welcome their new butler, Peru, who only asked them to take care of him. Aaron watched in silence, remembering when she had a question for the young master yesterday. She had wanted to know why he would put someone named Peru in her place as butler. The protagonist scratched his head and replied that he was a spy sent by Commander Karox of the White Eagle and Miss Kana. Aaron said that even if it were true, she couldn't trust him nearby as a butler. The protagonist replied that Peru now only listened to his orders. Clyde told the young master he had a question. Yurin replied that it was good and told him to go ahead. The aspiring knight replied that even with only two of them, it was already a knight order, but it should have a chief or commander. Originally, the chief was the one with superior skills, but Aaron was delicate and small and didn't look strong, so he should be the chief, and the protagonist replied that he was right. The strongest knight should be the chief, so from now on, these two should have a combat. Only a few seconds passed, and Clyde admitted defeat with Aaron holding her sword near his neck. She said his attack patterns were too simple and needed much improvement to not give up on his preparations. Clyde accepted and said he would keep that tip in mind. The protagonist simply accepted and stated that with this, the leader of this knight order was decided to be Aaron, and he applauded her along with Peru. Peru announced that he would prepare dinner first, and so the day passed. The young man thought he was far enough but could still feel energy and should test his new technique. Using internal energy, not voice, to create sound waves and deliver them to the minds of his targets, a technique often used in wuxia stories. He then mentally called for Peru. Peru responded to the young master, turning around, but he noticed he wasn't nearby. The protagonist repeated his name a few more times, leaving his butler completely bewildered and frightened. Yurin questioned why he seemed so surprised, and Peru complained that he was going crazy, wanting to know if it was some kind of black magic. The protagonist replied that it was a communication type. Perry said that, just as he thought, he wasn't just affected by the poison. He had heard that black mages could use both, so the young master was something of that sort. The protagonist became bewildered and told him to think whatever he wanted. He wanted to know if the poison he asked for last time was ready, and Peru confirmed. Snake's mind, a poison extracted from 100 venomous snakes, was ready. The protagonist told him to make sure to put a lot of poison in the celebration soup. Peru trembled with fear upon hearing this but accepted, saying he understood. The next day, the protagonist opened his eyes after meditating. He sighed deeply once more, thinking he was still at 3 stars, and his internal energy wasn't growing as he had expected. He didn't know how long it would take until the world's crisis, so he had no choice but to leave the Marquis's domain for now. He went to his father's study and announced that he was planning to leave. Wellington questioned him about this, as it had been a while since he left, and he must be thinking of some town in the Marquisate. The protagonist confirmed, and his father asked how many days he would be away. Yurin mused that he would go far but didn't need to reveal that, so he said he was thinking about a week. His father said he understood since he had been training hard, and asked who he wanted as an escort. The protagonist replied that he particularly didn't need one, leaving the lord bewildered. He told his son to be aware of his position, as he was the eldest son of Marquis Rox. The protagonist replied that he was going to a nearby town, so it was strange to have an escort. Wellington shouted that he still didn't know how difficult the world was, and he might have become strong for training, but he was afraid because of the poison. The protagonist thought that poisons wouldn't work on him anyway, but it seemed it would be difficult to persuade this man, so he stated he would do as he asked. His father then asked when he would depart. The protagonist replied that it would be in about 2 days, and Wellington decided he would prepare the escort. In his room, Yurin thought an escort would be useless since he planned to sneak away tomorrow. As dusk fell that day, the protagonist called Peru to his room. He informed Peru that he was going on a trip but had no money, and asked him to bring some. Peru must have the money that Crocs gave him to buy expensive potions. He questioned if Peru didn't plan to hand it over. Peru denied it and said it was an honor, so he would bring it regardless. The protagonist asked if he had anything else too, because he had seen that Peru had a subspace bag when he brought venomous herbs last time. This was a common item in fantasy novels, which could easily hold about a ton. Peru said he would hand it over to the young master, albeit very reluctantly. Yurin accepted and thanked him for it, as he wouldn't need a backpack anymore. But regardless, he told him to take something showing his fake medicine. He said it was a month's antidote for his poison. The protagonist said that since Peru was doing a good job, he was counting on him in the future, and if he continued, he would give him the complete cure soon, leaving Peru animated. The next day, near dawn, Yurin knew he had to leave stealthily since he was supposed to have an escort. He moved through the mansion with extreme ease. The young man thought that, as expected, there was no one around. A gardener noticed the young master and greeted him because he had woken up very early today. The protagonist merely acknowledged it. Thinking that he felt a lot of power emanating from this benevolent-looking, green-thumbed gardener, he decided to use his creator's eye. But he was surprised by what he read. For the rest of the day, the protagonist noted it was his first time away from the Marquis castle since leaving it. He noticed something different: the magic tower. A mage at a table noticed the young man. Asking how he could help him, Yurin replied that he'd like to use the portal. The mage asked if he had used it before, and the protagonist denied it. The young receptionist informed him they offered a mileage system, and the protagonist mused that it was just like airplanes. The mage asked his destination. Yurin replied it was Asu Castle. The receptionist noted it was quite far and understood. The fee would be 50 gold. After paying, he would need to sign the passport. The protagonist thought it was expensive as expected, but it was good that Peru had plenty of money. For now, he'd use a nickname, Paulian, the one he used in games. The mage asked him to follow. He was told to enter the room. When he heard a knock, it would mean he had arrived. The protagonist entered, reflecting that it was quite a beautiful arrangement. Suddenly, lightning struck the top of the castle. Yurin didn't understand, but a man announced he had arrived and could exit, welcoming him to Asu Castle. Yurin questioned how he was already there since he hadn't felt anything. The mage replied that using the portal was comfortable, a point of pride for mages. Yurin pondered this feeling. He wondered if he'd included such a comfortable sensation in his story, but the mage urged the client to use their services again and have a good journey. The doors opened and the protagonist found himself face to face with a completely new place. This was Asu Castle. Perhaps because it was an eastern region, different from the Marquis's domain, the architectural styles were distinct. Moreover, there were many people around. First, he would find a blacksmith alley. asking a resident for information. He followed a path to a small house in an alley. Yurin reflected that he had been searching for a while but couldn't find the unicorn blacksmith. The sky was already growing dark. This was the last place he needed to check it soon. A sword lay on an anvil and a blacksmith hammered it to shape it. The protagonist asked if anyone was there. The blacksmith spotted the new customer and the protagonist confirmed. But he had a question. Among the blacksmiths there, he wanted to know if the blacksmith happened to know someone called the Unicorn Blacksmith. The man replied that he didn't know of any blacksmiths with that name around. Yurin wondered if he had come to the wrong place, but the blacksmith said, regardless, that's the name I plan to use for my shop soon. Yurin used his creator's eye on him, seeing his name was Jiranox, and he possessed the trait of creating demonic weapons. The protagonist realized he had found the right place. He asked if he could look at the weapons he was selling. The blacksmith told him he could go that way to browse. Yurin examined all the weapons and armors on the wall. Asking how business was, the blacksmith looked confused. He explained that since his shop was at the end of the alley and his skills weren't incredible, even if customers came occasionally, they usually just looked and left. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep it up. The protagonist mused that it was interesting. The equipment there was no joke. He saw the Wind Spirit Rapier, which increased attack and movement speed, and also the Fire Spirit Longsword, which boosted strength and stamina. He then asked if Jiranox made them himself. Jiranox replied yes, but when he finished them, they turned out to be major failures. Once crafted, the swords became abnormally heavy. Even a strong man couldn't lift them, so no one decided to buy those weapons. Yurin thought it was because unworthy hands had touched the blades. If the right person held them, the sword's power would awaken. He still didn't know how true will worked, so he announced he would take those two swords. Jiranox replied they were failed pieces, but the protagonist said they were perfect to give to Aaron and Clyde. He reflected that it wasn't the treasure he was looking for. Regardless, he asked if he had any very rusty weapons. The man didn't understand. The protagonist then showed him a box full of old tools. The blacksmith said it was strange for him to ask for rusty weapons. He'd just set those aside to sell later. These things wouldn't be used anyway. The protagonist put his hand in the box, saying that this was exactly as he had envisioned it. Jiranox noticed the weapon and replied he had made it. It was already in a warehouse when he arrived. He had no idea where it came from. He considered throwing it away as waste but kept it. The protagonist replied he'd want the dagger too, and Jiranox was surprised. He said since he only chose defected weapons, he should only pay 2 gold and the dagger would be a gift. The protagonist thought this was a bargain. If the true nature of these weapons were revealed, he couldn't buy them for less than 200 gold pieces. But more than that, it was the blacksmith he truly wanted. So he repeated that Jiranox's business wasn't doing well and offered to close the shop for him to become his private blacksmith. Jiranox said it was very sudden and he didn't know how to respond. He wasn't against closing, but it was too abrupt. The protagonist decided he would introduce himself first. He was the invincible spear that guarded the south. Jiranox of House Rocks. Jiranox was surprised to hear the name of the Marquis' young master. He then knelt, asking for the Lord's forgiveness, as he never imagined he would come to such a humble place. The protagonist told him to stand up. Jiranox replied there was no need. It was comfortable like this, and he could speak freely. The protagonist accepted, but still insisted he should rise, thinking he couldn't escape the feudal mindset. Jiranox questioned why he would want to employ a poor blacksmith like him. The protagonist replied it was because of his special talent. The blacksmith said he had no such thing. His master trained him harshly every day. The protagonist mused that he seemed to have been trained in a brutal Spartan style. He then said that he had visited many forges today and seen various weapons, but Jiranox were different. He showed great care and dedication to them. His swords were finely crafted, and their grips especially were meticulously made, vital to prevent the sword from slipping in battle. Seeing his dedication, he believed Jiranox would one day awaken a truly special gift. The protagonist wondered if he could truly recruit him. Jiranox replied that he would follow the young master, but he really wasn't like the rumors said. The protagonist asked if that was about him being trash. Anyway, he would show the blacksmith something amusing. He placed his fingertip on the dagger. Then he commanded it to awaken with his blood, for it was the Agnes relic of a million forms. The weapon began to levitate and floated out of the protagonist's hand. The blacksmith wondered what that was. It looked like a legendary ego sword. Yurin thought that originally it was the protagonist who was supposed to obtain it. The system asked if he wished to form a soul contract with Aans, and the young man proceeded with it. The soul took on a different form with a strange kind of voice. It questioned what the hell this was and who he thought he was to make a contract with it. You don't have any talent anyway. The protagonist thought it was disappointed not to feel mana coming from him, but his way of speaking was very arrogant. The sword said this was annoying. A guy like him actually wanted a contract. Anyway, how do you know about my release enchantment? The protagonist replied he'd heard it from a great prophet, thinking he had just made that up to make his story coherent. Aang's questioned how the great prophet had spoken to someone like him. And anyway, you must know about my abilities. The protagonist confirmed. Aang's was freeform equipment that could split into a primary and secondary body, capable of transforming into any form the user imagined. In the original story, the protagonist used a sword and shield. Even if the secondary weapon was lost, it simply returned to the main body. Aang said he probably didn't know how to use it, as it could only be wielded with mana. He should give up because of that. The protagonist watched in silence. He commented that she was the noisy type. Pointing at the weapon, he thought he could use it like a ring. Ayan said it was hot and felt like it was melting, while the protagonist thought the internal energy worked well with mana. In any case, he called for Jiranox. Asking how long Jiranox wanted to stay in this place, the blacksmith replied that 2 days would be enough. In 2 days, at dusk, a protagonist was set to meet him in the castle's central park. On his way there, he recognized a voice. Ilya questioned what it was and why he was there, leaving the protagonist bewildered. The protagonist had the same question, thinking the scene in front of the central park felt familiar. It was the very spot where the original protagonist first met Ilya. The girl asked what was wrong with Yurin, and the young man apologized, thinking the original story had changed. Ilya dismounted her horse, reminding him she had asked why he was there. The protagonist replied he was looking for a blacksmith. She found this odd, as there were many within the Rock's family. Yurin explained he wished to hire someone independently. The girl said if he told her earlier, she would have helped, but the protagonist had already found a good person. He was approaching. Jiranox called out, "Young master." Asking if he waited long, the protagonist denied it, saying he arrived at the perfect time. He was introducing his fiancée Ilya when someone interrupted, calling for the team leader. They were about to depart and wanted to know who this person was. Ilya called Musk and introduced her fiancé, Jiranox. The man repeated the name, fear in his voice. He said it was incredible to see a member of the Marquis Rock's family in such a place, identifying himself as the commander of the Marcus family's 5th Night Division. Musk Malone was his name. The protagonist said it was good to meet him. He reflected that he already knew enough without Musk's full explanation. To put it simply, Musk was a pathetic extra with a boring personality. As Musk and his knights were moving, children blocked their path. The protagonist intervened, and a fight broke out. Ilya appeared just in time, stopping everything, and thus their relationship began. But the important part of this was, the protagonist accompanies Ilya in battle and saves her from a deadly situation. But he can't simply find the protagonist again. So he has no choice, he can't let her lose her life. He called the girl and asked where she was going. Ilya replied that due to the growing waves of orcs around Asu Castle, her knights were ordered to subjugate them. The protagonist said he had a favor to ask in this situation. He wanted to go with her, and Ilya questioned his reason. The protagonist explained that as someone in training, he sought real combat experience and wished to test his skills. Ilya said it could be dangerous, but the protagonist simply accepted, saying he was good at running. The girl paused to think. She accepted and ordered Sir Musk to provide a horse. He tried to argue they weren't going on a casual trip, and even with the orcs, they couldn't let their guard down, especially since he felt no mana from Yurin and had no obligation or desire to protect anyone. Ilya called Sir Musk once more, stating it was an order and he should stop talking and just do it. Musk murmured his acceptance, saying he would prepare everything, and if it was an order, he would just do it, clearly emanating a dark intent as he looked back. The protagonist and Ilya stared at each other in silence. As the day passed, she commented that it was dangerous and her fiancé should stay close. Yurin simply accepted. He told Jiranox to hold on tight, and Jiranox accepted the young master's order. Thus, the army began to advance. In the area ahead, Ilya announced that they would now divide into groups of 5 to find the orc village. They shouldn't attack first, but return and give a signal if found. Then they would divide, and she would follow that path with her group. They advanced, and the day passed until nightfall. A soldier commented that the tracks were very far and hard to find. It was getting dark, and he wanted to know what to do. Ilya said they had no choice. For now, they would return. But a sudden noise swept over the group. It was a flare signal, and there was one from another path too, repeating in other places. Ilya asked how many they had seen now, totaling 5, but Yurin thought it was 4 and he hadn't counted. The leader decided to go to the northwest desert first, so they began to ride in that direction. Ilya noticed something upon arriving near. All her soldiers were lifeless. The members of her group were astonished. Even the armor had melted, and they wondered when it hit them. Ilya ordered them to move forward towards the flare signal from the south, so they rode in that direction with extreme haste. She noticed the same thing upon arriving there. All her soldiers were lifeless. Her companion warned that they should move to the next area quickly, but Yurin interrupted, saying they couldn't go now. Ilya questioned this and called her husband's name. The protagonist warned that the orcs were hunting the soldiers one by one, and at this point they have no chance of victory. They should stop the operation and send a flare signal to gather forces there. Her soldier told him to be quiet, claiming he knew nothing about advancing in such a formation. He claimed everything was a mess because of a punk like him. Yurin recalled that in the original story, the protagonist was also accused. He was cursed by readers for making them eat sweet potatoes because of it, and was now suffering from PTSD. Musk claimed Yurin knew nothing about battles, but the protagonist told him to shut up, leaving the soldier completely shocked. He suddenly fell to the ground, suffering, but Ilya denied this. She called her fiancé while he ordered the subordinate to know his place. Musk understood and begged for forgiveness, while the protagonist merely watched. He turned to Ilya, thinking that in the original story, she didn't listen to the protagonist and was lost in thought. Yurin told her to judge for herself, wondering if it was really the time. Ilya conceded that, as he said, she had failed to think calmly about the situation. They should immediately send the blue flare signal to gather the troops there. The signal emanated into the sky shortly after, observable throughout the forest. Yurin rested with the group. Jiranox said the young master was incredible. He had made them move according to his will, and the protagonist replied it was nothing. The blacksmith said the soldiers would rejoin them, but Yurin said perhaps. Most soldiers wouldn't be able to come, he reflected, because of that bastard Karuta who was dealing with them. Jiranox called the young master, asking what he was waiting for. The protagonist replied it was a real battle. A subordinate ran in that direction and called the squad leader, telling her to run because she should just leave now. Hylia questioned this and brandished her sword toward a noise. An immense group of orcs marched towards them, an overwhelmingly numerous army. Musk complained that it was an insane amount of monsters. Hylia was perplexed and apologized to Yurin, feeling it was her fault they were in trouble. The protagonist replied that it was fine. They wouldn't lose their lives there, he assured her. She questioned what her fiancé would do. He called Agons and said they would test what they had practiced for these 2 days, using the fake body to create black iron pellets. The 3-star ability he obtained from the body but hadn't had a chance to test was the black iron explosion. Then he threw the pellet towards them, emanating immense energy. The ball merely hit the orcs' axes, and they started to laugh, until an explosion occurred and engulfed the entire area. The numbers decreased significantly with just the protagonist's strike. He waved his hand, making the black iron explosion return, thinking that Agnes' ability had energy with her skills. The other orcs decided to advance against the young man, but he simply launched the ball, causing another immense explosion in the area. Hylia questioned what he had thrown. The protagonists said they were black iron spheres and would explain in detail later. However, the number of orcs had greatly decreased. Hylia questioned what her army was doing because they can win. Now is their chance, and they should defeat the remaining orcs. Advancing against the creatures, Hylia managed to separate one of them. Her subordinates, with much effort, managed to attack the other. One of the watching orcs was astonished, but then he came face to face with a reddish figure this time. Looking up in fear, the figure then grabbed his head with its hand. Hylia and her army suddenly turned. She questioned what this thing was. It was an absurd size, with that creature having exploded the orc. The protagonist thought it had finally appeared. That was Karuta, the legendary orc warrior. If they didn't capture this arrogant one today, everyone would lose their lives. Karuta let out a roar that tormented everyone in that area. Bracing his sword on the surface, he leaped towards Hylia. The girl shouted that she needed to dodge, but her husband held her back, asking why she was standing still. He pulled her away from the attack's impact. He said they had almost lost their lives. Hylia was aghast, seeing her subordinates lifeless. Karuta roared, glaring at the protagonist. Yurin simply hurled an explosion of black iron at him. It zoomed towards the ogre's neck, then detonated like a blast, but Karuta remained untouched and roared again. He mumbled something as he walked towards the protagonists. Yurin wondered if it wasn't working. Its build was that of an orc warrior, and its skin was as hard as steel. Hylia cursed the guy, demanding how he dared defeat her subordinates like this. She emanated her sword aura, vowing she wouldn't forgive this. Then she charged with her skill at extreme speed. Her sword clashed equally against the orc warriors. They exchanged a few blows, but Karuta remained unyielding, simply defending everything. The subordinates cheered for their team leader, saying she was really cool. Yurin thought that, as expected of Hylia, her Sword Queen trait was overpowered, but it was still the beginning of the novel, and to think she was strong enough to push Karuta to this extent, even cutting his armor and skin. The monster raged, truly hit for the first time, drawing the girl's attention. He let out a roar, emanating his aura, and Hylia wondered how he was capable of that. Karuta looked to the side and swiftly moved his sword, forcing Hylia to block. Just like in the original story, Hylia was defeated by Karuta. The soldiers went to tend to their team leader. Hylia said it was humiliating, but she couldn't defeat this monster. They needed to flee to survive, but the protagonist stepped to the front of the battle. The orc called out to Yurin in its bestial tongue. Meanwhile, the protagonist simply gripped his dagger, preparing to throw it. He launched his direct blast at the creature. Karuta easily swatted the attack away. Yurin thought the dagger thrown with a direct blast was destroyed with a simple blow, just as he expected. The monster roared again, attempting to communicate with the protagonist, but then it became confused, noticing something. For on its armor's shoulder pad, there were remnants of the black iron explosion. Causing an immense chain reaction, Karuta was wounded by the strike, rendering his right arm useless. The protagonist said the first one he threw was fake. Karuta had been too busy blocking the direct strike to notice the one behind him. Its skin might be steel, but it seemed its entire body wasn't. Its weak point remained the crack in its armor, so he couldn't just throw things there. The golem trembled in fear before the protagonist's plans. It then charged at him with instinctive force. It attempted a horizontal slash, but Yurin managed to dodge. The monster tried to attack several more times, but was always evaded. Yurin moved his dagger, asking what it intended to do. Just then, another explosion hit the creature. The protagonist said it was only afraid of this, but he had no intention of letting it capture him easily. The orc turned to look at Jiranox. Then it started walking towards the man, while the protagonist just shouted not to. Karuta leaped towards the blacksmith. The protagonist cursed the situation and unleashed his internal energy. He had to save him somehow. He poured as much internal energy as he could into his draconic treasure steps. The monster tried to hit the blacksmith, but the protagonist intercepted with a speed that left trails. That blast hit the ground hard, and Karuta turned. Hylia said it was impossible. That speed just now was incredible. The protagonist decided to end the fight now and called for Aans. One of the high-level hidden weapons of the four heavens of the Tang clan was the flower butterfly. He then launched it at the orc using a curved shot. The butterfly flew slowly towards the orc. It moved gracefully and delicately. Ilya called it a beautiful strike, while the orc trembled in fear. It tried to swat the butterfly away with its sword, but it dodged all attacks, until the butterfly broke through its defense and touched its chest, making the orc scream as never before in its life, causing a final explosion. Yuren watched, a little apprehensive, and Alia was stunned. The protagonist wasn't sure, but with that much power infused into the bloody flower butterfly, it was more than enough to pierce the orc warrior. It was truly overwhelming. Musk said he fell, and they won the battle. Ilya turned, saying it wasn't over yet. There were still smaller orcs remaining. She ordered her army to finish them off. Jiranox thanked the young master for saving him, and the protagonist reflected that the first real battle had safely concluded. That night, at the army camp, the protagonist asked Ilya if she was hurt. She replied she wasn't fine, but since she was in his debt, she couldn't complain. The protagonist said it was fine if they helped, and it was natural, given what she asked earlier. He didn't train in swordsmanship, but in hidden equipment, leaving the girl puzzled. The protagonist confirmed it, as the explosive sphere and the butterfly at the end were his hidden weapons. She found it unbelievable. It was incredibly powerful. Yuren mused it was hard for her to accept. He was sure she'd spent her whole life thinking the sword was the best weapon, but her horizons had just expanded. A knight informed the captain that he had prepared a magic bag. Ilya accepted, saying they might not be able to find all the bodies now, but they should at least take the leader. She plunged her sword into Karuta's body. She stood up, remarking that its size was incredible. If they tried to put it straight into the magic bag, it wouldn't fit. Ilya said it was fine, they were made for guarding, so they shouldn't feel bad. But as night was falling, they should return now. They then moved on horseback as Musk met the captain. She asked where he had been. The fire signal had happened a long time ago. The man seemed puzzled and said they were ambushed by orcs far away and were delayed because of the fight. Ilya understood but wanted to know where the others were, as only 2 remained. Musk replied that they had been defeated, and the orcs were stronger than expected. But the captain demanded to see the bodies and ordered them brought to her, while the knight tried to change the subject. He walked towards her as Ilya continued giving orders. Then he announced he would explain their initial positions first, until he stealthily drew a dagger to try and attack Ilya. But the protagonist intervened. Musk fell to the ground. Yuren said he claimed to be fighting orcs, but there wasn't a drop of green blood on him. He was clearly collaborating with the creatures, leaking information from the start. Musk questioned how he found out. Ilya drew her sword, saying that's how it worked. The man tried to say the Malone family had great achievements serving the Marcus family, but she simply dismissed it as nothing. She told him to stop, slashing again. And so the night continued. At the noble residence in Isu Castle, Jiranox woke the young master, calling him a few times. Yuren got up, asking what he needed. The blacksmith said it was almost lunchtime. Also, Captain Ilya was here to see him. The girl appeared, wearing a black dress, asking if her fiancé had slept well. The protagonist was utterly baffled. He questioned what was with that outfit. Ilya replied that Yuren should come to her house. Her father had ordered her to bring him along, and she asked if he would come. The protagonist thought that up close, calling her the most beautiful woman in the world wasn't an exaggeration, and he said he definitely would. Ilya said she'd wait for him out front, and he should get ready to leave. Yuren started to reason a bit. He noticed her favorability had only grown since he helped her once. Outside, the protagonist called Ilya and apologized for making her wait. The people outside glorified the iron-blooded knight, Lady Ilya, who single-handedly defeated the orc warrior, and the glory was hers. Yuren thought this title was given to her because she didn't give up, even when facing death. It was the same as in the novel. People also shouted that he was Lord Yuren, the Iron Mage, and that he was extremely handsome. The protagonist was puzzled by this, thinking these nicknames spread from soldier testimonies. He figured they saw him manipulating metal spheres and thought he was a mage, while Ilya suddenly called him. She said she'd mentioned it before, but she was very grateful for being saved twice. The protagonist said she didn't need to mention it. It was natural. The girl announced that at dawn she went to the forest to retrieve the bodies from the terrible battlefield. It was heartbreaking to see all of them around the forest. Then she realized something. If it hadn't been for him yesterday, they would have ended up the same way. The protagonist looks down thoughtfully. Ilya declares she will train harder and become stronger. She would surpass everyone without exception and never be defeated again, while Yuren thinks she has truly blossomed her talent. The mages prepared the portal to the Marcus domain. Ilya said that since it wasn't far, her father sent family mages. They should go quickly, meeting in the middle of the portal. Those mages began to conjure, and the teleportation magic was performed. Yuren and Jiranox were astonished by this. Ilya mentioned it had been a while since he last visited her territory. The protagonist thought the scenery changed in a blink, feeling a bit dizzy. Jiranox questioned if all noble families had such immense residences. Anyway, it seemed the protagonist was called for a meal. In the original story, the protagonist only ate Chirin's suit from the Marquis's domain every day, but today he would finally taste real noble cuisine. The Marquis welcomed his son-in-law, telling Yurin to enter. Yurin tried to bow, but the Marquis told him to just sit, as no formality was needed. The young man simply accepted and sat opposite Ilya. Marquis said he should first thank him, because before being his fiancée, she was his daughter, and he was grateful for him saving Ilya's life. The protagonist said it was nothing much, just something he had to do. Then the meal was brought to them. The protagonist waited anxiously for it to be revealed. That was the Marquis family's special Chirin soup. The Marquis said that similar to the Rock's family, they had their secret recipe and their tradition was to eat Chirin after a battle. So please, he should enjoy it, and Yurin thanked him for the food, trying to convince himself that he was capable. Suddenly, as they ate, the Marquis questioned when they planned to marry. The protagonist was confused and the Marquis said it was about his daughter. Yurin thought it must be a test. The Marquis probably disliked him since his affection was -10, even after saving his daughter. So he replied he would marry now if he could, and Ilya was embarrassed by this. The protagonist continued that he was not get the family heir, and his troublesome past made people look down on him. To be worthy of Ilya, he would change himself, and once he became heir, he would take her as his wife. The Marquis questioned if he thought this was possible, as he heard his younger brother was considered a genius. Do you really think he could surpass him and become heir? Yurin replied he was certainly capable. The Marquis laughed, saying he truly had changed, just as the rumors claimed, and he would support him. But he changed the subject, mentioning that before Yurin arrived, a message came from Wellington. His presence had already reached the Rock's family, and someone informed him via magic communication. The protagonist questioned what his father said, and the Marquis replied that they should communicate after the meal. The protagonist simply thanked him and looked at Ilya as she ate, wondering why she was in a bad mood again. Regardless, it seemed he had managed to leave a good impression on Marcus. In another room, the communication began. A mage took the orb to the Rock's household, then started projecting the Lord's image. The protagonist thought it was like a projector or a video call. The young man called out to his father and asked for forgiveness, while his father cursed the brat. But he then asked if he had been hurt anywhere, and the protagonist denied it. Wellington changed the subject immediately, wanting to know if it was true that he had saved Ilya and defeated an orc warrior. The protagonist replied that he'd only had a bit of luck. His father understood, saying he would hear the details upon his return, and wanted to know when he would come home. Yurin decided he would return the day after tomorrow. His father warned him to bring his brother when he came, leaving the young man shocked. The Marquis said Yurin would leave early tomorrow, but it would be good if he stayed a few more days, and Yurin replied that he wanted to. However, his father had given him a task. The Marquis said it was a pity, but he would provide a magic portal so he could travel comfortably. Yurin sighed a little but decided to refuse no matter how grateful he was. He was at a level where he needed to improve his skills by training himself, and it would be better not to relax with a teleport. The Marquis said he truly had become a different person. He was excited to discover how strong Yurin would become, and the protagonist thanked him. Ilya smiled at that response, and Yurin thought she must have liked it. Outside, the protagonist thought he had a reason not to use the Marquis family's teleport. Jironox said the way to the capital was in the other direction, and Yurin had said they would go there. The protagonist announced that he needed to stop at a place before that, a large mountain next to the Marquisate known as the Dragon's Clearing. Jironox questioned this, saying he wanted to go there before heading to the forge. He asked if the young master would also make a wish, but the protagonist denied it. Instead, he would take possession of a treasure, thinking it was something the original protagonist would find later. They continued walking through that place. The cave, called the Dragon's Clearing, was the home of the species in ancient times. His subordinate commented that it was early, but there were many people. He asked if there would really be a treasure there, but the protagonist said it was false and the world was full of secrets. So Jironox should follow, as they were going to the front of the mountain, and Jironox accepted. They walked, and the blacksmith breathed heavily, commenting that there was nothing there. The protagonist wondered if this was it, the entrance he had configured in the shape of a car door. He looked around, wondering if anyone was nearby. The protagonist decided he would just open the car door. They were astonished when the door suddenly took shape and opened sideways. Jironox said this was utterly impossible, but the protagonist decided they would just enter. They walked inside until the stone closed again. The blacksmith remarked that it was brighter than he expected there. Seeing that it was a gemstone, Yurin told him not to touch it, as a trap would be unlocked. Jironox questioned what kind of trap it was, but the protagonist explained that the entire space would probably become a sea of fire. There were many traps around, so Jironox should stay close to him, and the blacksmith simply accepted. They walked towards an altar facing it. Jironox said it was incredible, but there was nothing on top. The protagonist questioned if Jironox knew what was hidden behind it. Since the false dragon's clearing ended there, and behind that wall, he felt the energy of people. Now they were praying to the two of them. The protagonist decided they would look at the treasure anyway. Pushing the handle beneath the altar, an entrance opened, and Jironox said it was unbelievable. All of it was 3 bags of gold coins. Yurin picked up a box, thinking that this was more valuable than the coins. It was the warrior's jade with a rebirth effect essential for becoming stronger. They moved forward and Juranox questioned where they should go. Yurin replied it was to the magic tower in Heisu Castle. The blacksmith said that even at this hour, many people were still praying out front. Then the young man noticed a calm presence and pressure. He used the creator's eye on that woman. However, nothing happened, and the protagonist thought she only appeared later in the novel. Juranox questioned what that was. The protagonist wondered how her aura was so powerful. She was an existence he couldn't defeat now, so he needed to get out of there very quickly.